you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
All right, it is almost time. We are less than 24 hours away from the release of Champions Arena. I am super hyped. I've already put out my guide for my top tips and tricks to help you get started. The other big question that everybody keeps asking after that video is which characters, which champions do I want to go after first? And that is a tough question to answer because I've got just a little bit of experience on the test server. It's early game. I don't even have all of the characters on the test server to really check out, but I'm going to do my best as we have our first ever Champions Arena tier guide. In this video, we're gonna look at the uncommons, commons, and rares, because those are the ones that I've unlocked everybody in that tier. I've gotten to play with and against most of them, so I've gotten a chance to kind of check them out a little bit. There are 24 of them here, and there's just so many characters. So we'll look at the epics and the legendaries later here in a little bit, but I wanted to break it down with just these that you're probably going to come across early in the game that you're going to see first, and I'm going to put them into 5 different tiers here, and we're gonna go through this. We're gonna try to go through this fairly quickly. There's a lot of characters, but I want to talk at least a little bit about every single one of them and why they have their tier. I'll go ahead and show you the final list here. I'll put the final list up on the screen. This is what I came out to. We've got S, A, B, C, and D tiers. Top characters at the bottom. Top champions are at the top. Bottom ranked champions are at the bottom. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay, let's go through. If you want to follow along, you want to skip ahead. If you're on YouTube, I'll timestamp these so you can skip around. If you're over on a different viewing platform, I will go in the order starting at the bottom with these commons. We're gonna go in reverse order, so you can kind of see the order that'll be going through if you want to skip around. So we're gonna try and make this quick. What I'm going to focus on looking at these are these skills. So remember, as you combine cards, you can unlock different skills. There is 1, 2, 3, level 1, 2, 3, and then a passive. They all have 4 skills, and we're going to go through these, and I'm going to again try to keep this quick for you guys. Okay, Bolkin, the first common, and he's in D tier. I've got him in D tier. He's got a passive here. Damage increases by 30% against targets with speed down. The biggest reason speed down is a debuff that I actually really like. Speed is king in these turn-based games. Almost everyone I've played, speed has been very important. I expect it's going to be the same here. So speed down is a nice debuff, but we don't have many champions that really inflict it. So there's not a lot of chance for synergy here. And he inflicts it with his level 2 skill. So he does have it, but it's only on a single target. And I feel like it's going to be really kind of hard to take advantage of that synergy. So a decent amount of damage there, not bad, but then it's split across random targets. So the combination of not a bunch of synergy and splitting his attack, some randomness there. That's why I've got him at the bottom. Here is a common champion though that I have near the top. I have him A tier. I hated facing this guy. So he's got his passive where he goes into this cower stance. So let's actually look at that first here. So we've got over here, it's his level 3. He goes into cower for 1 turn, takes decreased damage, and then turns around and deals, if you got a card match, 250% damage. This thing hits hard. Now, it takes an extra turn. You have to wait an extra turn to deal that damage, and it's a random enemy. But one thing with his passive is that if we attack anybody else gets attacked, he gets 30% turn gauge. So what typically happens is others get attacked, and then he just goes again almost immediately. He gets so much turn gauge that he turns around really quick and does a lot of damage. And he has this shenanigans, which grants attract to a random ally. So you have to put him on a pretty beefy team because you don't want another glass cannon alongside and they get the attract. Attract is what most games consider taunt. So he gives that attract to other characters. There's not a lot of ways to get attract. So I really like that ability. You go with that ability, then you get the cower. With another ally having attract, they have to go attack the others. He gains turn meter and gets off this huge attack. And there you can see his basic. He's gonna deal damage and get some mana. By the way, I like attacks that gain mana. I really do. So another really good common EZ05. And by the way, I feel like I should have said this earlier, but my frame rate looks a little low. The color looks a little bad. I'm airplaying this from a crappy old iPad. The resolution's not good. The game looks much, much better once we download it. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to perfect this setup because less than 24 hours, I'm gonna be on my Android, I'm gonna be on my PC that I have a better setup for. So everything's gonna look much crisper tomorrow. So just something to keep in mind. Anyways, easy 0-5. Deals, let's see, let's start out with, I'm starting out with the passives. 12% increase in attack in proportion to the number of buffs that he has. This guy can deal a crap ton of damage. He just demolishes people. So let's start off with his 2. We'll look at the 1 real quick just so you can see it there. Everybody's got a pretty standard normal attack. So overheat. Unfortunately, he gives himself a damage over time, but he gains crit rate up and crit damage up. Gets the speed increase. Those are huge. Getting the crit rate up, that's plus 30% chance, plus 60% extra crit damage. And then we come over here. If we get a card match, 115% damage on an AoE is massive AoE damage. If he's got crit rate up and crit damage up, that gives him an extra 24% just from his buffs. Then you get the high chance at a crit. It's very easy to give him some extra buffs, like attack up, for example, will give him extra damage for having a buff, and then the attack up itself, there's lots of characters that give attack up. This guy hits hard. He absolutely hits hard, and that's why I've got him up at A tier. Jingo! Jingo is a common I have down at D tier. Another one near the bottom, and I don't know, I feel like I might be underrating him a little bit. His passive gives him stacks of ammo. The ammo gives him a 50% extra skill damage for his level 2 and level 3 skills. It's consumed when it's used, so basically the first 2 times he uses it. So he does a lot of damage early in the battle. And these attacks do a decent amount of damage, 170%. Now these are based on the attacks. All the attack sets are a little different. 220% single damage attack. Then you get the extra 50% from his passive. He can do a decent chunk of damage. But I just found that there were other damage dealers that I really like better. After he uses those 2 attacks and he loses his ammo, tends to not be very good, really. And just without having a lot of synergies for other cards, or other characters, I didn't find myself using him much. Flabby is another common that I have at the bottom of the barrel, down at tier D. And basically the reason, so he gets defense up to start the turn. He is a tank, but that gives no reason that we can't just ignore him. Every time I faced him, I just ignored him for last. It wasn't much of a threat. Yeah, he gains defense up to start the battle, but I just wouldn't attack him. He's a tank. I don't really want to go after him first anyways. So he does have a stun, but it's only 70%. I say only, that's a decent amount. But that was about the only thing I liked about him. And when that's about the only thing he's got going for him, and it's not 100%, I just wasn't a fan of Flabby here. He can inflict attack down only on a single character. There's his normal if you want to see all of his abilities. But that was the big reason I didn't like Flabby. A tank with no incentive to just ignore him. So here we go. Wizy, I've got up at tier C. So overall, I didn't really love Wizy, but there's one thing he's got going from him. He can inflict damage over time with his attacks. It has a 30% chance. And what I like about that is you're gonna see a few other heroes, a few other champions. I call them heroes. I came from a game where they called heroes. But so anyways, several other champions here that have synergy with damage over time. So being able to spread around those dots actually compare very well with some of these other cards, and that bumps them up to a C for me. So here's a normal attack, can gain mana. 2 attacks for random enemies, decent damage, but not anything special. Everything I liked was with his dots and spreading the dots around. Okay, Umogin. By the way, I have no idea how to pronounce most of these names, so I have no authority on name pronouncing. Okay, he has a passive. Again, he's a tank. He's kind of like Flabby in a way, in that he's a tank, but he doesn't really give you a reason to not just ignore him. Okay, he's going to stack Bloodlust at the beginning of each turn. So if you don't take him out early, he's going to stack up a lot of Bloodlust. But I just didn't find that to be that devastating. Defense increases by 5%. His level 3 skill here, he gets a decent heal. Like if he's got 5 stacks of Bloodlust, he can heal for 35%. I mean, that's nice, but if you were just ignoring him anyways, he sometimes could be a pain at the end if you're trying to go like one-on-one or something like that, and he can heal up and have a lot of defense and that type of thing. But overall, I found I could mainly just ignore him because he doesn't have a ton of attack and decrease the turn gauge, gain some mana there, but it just wasn't I didn't view him as a huge threat. All right, Zaima is the first of our kind of support healers here. And I put all three of them, there are three that are kind of very similar in tier B. Same is gonna be tier B. And what I really like here is her passive. Gains 1 mana at the beginning of every turn. I think that's great. You could use just the normal attack. You match the cards, 2 mana there, so it can gain 3 mana. That's enough to unlock some of those skills. And I really like that mana gain. Here, attack up and increase the turn gauge by 20%. I was playing, a lot of times I had a really high damage attacker, and I would just give them that attack up, constantly give them 20% turn gauge so they could go as much as possible. And I found myself mainly using those 2 abilities, but then the barrier is kind of nice as well. I like the barrier better than the heal, 75% of attack to all allies. Because the one thing about a heal, if you have an AoE heal, a lot of times there's allies that just don't need it. It's kind of wasted. When you just put a barrier on top of it, they can always take advantage of that. So I really like that. I really like that barrier. So Zaima, I put them in B tier because I don't think they're necessarily super powerful, but it is valuable to have these healers. And I think you want one of them. There's 3 of them that are similar, 1 in each color. And so I just kind of put them mid tier. I think you could argue because it is nice to have one of them, you could maybe bump them up tiers. I don't know. You can make different arguments there. Okay, BB0. He's gonna gain speed up with turn of battle. Overall, I put him in tier B as well, just because he was just kind of solid. Nothing that I really loved, but nothing that I necessarily hated. Decent amount of attack there. What I do really like, what I do really like is the ability to give attack up to himself while doing damage. You'll see a few other characters will give themselves attack up or give themselves crit damage up, crit rate up, whatever the case is, and they waste their turn. They spend their turn giving them the buffs. He gives himself that buff and still does damage and can do a decent amount of damage. And you can typically use a level 2 every 2 turns, so you can basically keep attack up on him the entire time, and that allows him to do some nice damage. And that's what I thought made him a fairly solid attacker. Okay, Zoe is one of the other healers. Our healer for our yellow grants defense up to the ally with the highest attack at the start of battle. This is really good because if you're trying to who's the first champion we're typically going to target on the other side? We're going to target their glass cannon, right? Their highest damage healer. Now, it can depend on the makeup. That's not always true, but that tends to be the case. Well, you give that character defense up. You give the character that is being attacked, or that they want to attack, a defense up, and that ends up being pretty nice. So then she can grant recovery to allies for all turns. It's going to heal HP every turn. I don't use that a ton, but I like just the level 2 ability. Attack up and turn gauge. Give your attacker extra damage, extra turns. I like it, and then help gain mana for the team. So Roots is the other one again. So Zoe was B tier. Roots is B tier as well. Passive heals the HP of all allies by 30% when defeated. I wasn't a huge fan of that because a lot of times it just didn't come into a play if you're focus firing well. Roots is either gonna die early and there's nobody to heal, or it'll be the last one, and at that point it doesn't matter. But we've got some similar buffs here. Grants recovery to all allies, grants attack up to all allies. So here, instead of granting attack up to a single ally and giving them turn meter, you're just giving out attack up to everybody. And I think that can be nice. And the standard normal attack there. So Lucia is a decent attacker. I put in tier C though. Gains 20% attack if she has a buff. The big thing I didn't like here is she has no way to give herself buffs. Come over here, you can freeze a target, which is nice, becomes frozen, disabling all actions. But it's only 170%. Decent attack and a chance to freeze, so it's not a bad ability at all. Inflicts defense down on targets. Has some mana gain. I feel like she needed to gain buffs from somebody else, and while she does a decent amount of damage, her damage isn't so high that she was the one I was wanting to give attack up to or crit damage up to, or whatever the case was, if I was assigning buffs from someplace else. And that was a big reason that I found her underwhelming, is I didn't have a roster that was really handing out enough buffs for her to get that extra damage. So I didn't use her a lot, but I could see where if you build a team around getting a lot of buffs and some of these other cards that can do extra damage when they have buffs, and maybe we've got one, we go with the healer here, our Roots, who gives attack up to everybody. Maybe we'll see it could have a better shot there, but I didn't really find her that impressive. Pindleroots I had in tier A here, and Pindleroots passive heal self for, we mentioned the damage over time synergies, 2% heal when you attack an enemy with damage over time, and he's got several ways to dish out that damage over time as well. Deals a decent chunk of damage to 2 random enemies. So we hit 2 enemies, you can get double that heal. Not a huge heal, but it's still significant. Can get some extra, and then remember the dots are also doing damage as well too. So you're assigning a decent amount of damage out there, and we're gonna see some more damage over time synergy. So Pindleroots, I do kind of I think he's pretty solid. Fletcher is a rare card that I actually don't like. I had him down at tier D, and the reason's pretty simple. So he's got some cool mechanics here, but I just don't feel that they all pair that well. So he can gain Lizard Oil based on the energy, or based on the level of the card used, which is going to increase his speed by 3%. That's always good, right? And then he gets it whenever he counters an attack. Well, he has this ability over here, counterattack posture. Enters the counter stance, dealing damage equal to 90% of attack. But there's no way to force anybody to attack him. So if you're going up against an AoE team, or if you have maybe you have a different hero that can somehow assign a way to attack him, or to make enemies attack him, I feel like that could be great. But as is, if we're just looking at these rares and common heroes, there's no way to force, or no reliable way. We had a random, you've got a character that can randomly assign that, but there's no reliable way to make them attack Fletcher. So when I was facing him, he'd go into his counterattack posture, and I would just ignore him. And he's got this attack, which does a decent amount of damage. If you've piled up a lot of Lizard Oil, it can really hit hard, but he wastes a lot of turns to get to that. So I just wasn't a huge fan of his. Bolton is another rare card that I put in tier C. Wasn't a huge fan because it's kind of more the same. We have a tank, but there's no way to force anyone to attack the tank. Now he has a way that tries to punish you for ignoring him. He gets Stench when an ally is hit, and then consumes Stench when he is hit. That increases his attack and his speed. But his attack is just so low that even if he can get up to 5, even if he gets 15% attack bonus, he just still doesn't hit that hard. Here he's got an AoE attack that is still just fairly weak. Does decrease some turn gauge, which is nice, but he just doesn't hit that hard. I mean, he's a tank. He doesn't have great attack. So, and then here, the damage is based on his max HP. So increasing his attack when he does damage based on max HP, I don't know. I just didn't find it worthwhile to really gain that stench. Didn't feel like he did enough damage. And so when I was going against him, I would just kind of ignore him. So he wasn't terrible. I think he could be useful, but I wasn't, compared to some of the others, I didn't like him all that much. So now we have Ged. Is it Ged? Jed? I still don't know. His passive, he's gonna do a random attack at the beginning. 130% attack. It's random. That's one of the problems with him. We've got a lot of randomness. His skill, his tier 3 skill, 4 random enemies. Here he gets crit rate up, which can be nice. Again, he attacks while giving himself a damage boost. Crit rate up increases crit chances. So I do like that. But a lot of times it was just too much randomness and not enough damage to offset that. So I had him down in tier C. Kimblee. Kimblee might be one of the most controversial ones. I didn't know where to put him, so I took the easy way out. I put him in B, right in the middle. He is do or die. He can be a lot of fun. So before we look at our passive, you can see the normal there. Let's look at the Mega Rocket. Mega Rocket is an insane ability, okay? Oh, and by the way, he can, yeah, there's the time bomb. He has a way to get, you'll see a way to get crit chance up and crit damage up as well. 120% of attack has AoE damage, okay? That's a high AoE damage attack. And then he also has a chance to stun all of the enemies, a high damage AoE stun. If he hits that, it is nasty. It is insane. But he also has a chance to stun himself. 50% chance to stun himself. And it's this chance of stunning the entire other team is fairly low. If he does escape, he gets that crit rate up, crit power up. So if he escapes once and can do it again, if he gets a couple of those off, it's like good night. Good night. But he's just so RNG heavy, it's hard. He's got a time bomb that can deal some damage and flick defense down. So he can be a lot of fun, he can be a little chaotic. Too much randomness for me, so I'm not a big fan of him, but man, if you can land some insane combos that can make him very, very good. Okay, my first S tier character. Gordon and, what's his name? It's cut off. Gordon and Durden. It's all about this mark. At the beginning of each turn, he shoots a random enemy and leaves a mark. Mark makes them take 30% extra damage. Not just from this character, but from any source. And I love spreading that mark around. I absolutely love spreading that mark around and doing extra damage. And everything is about attacking like all the card matches are attack the card with marks, and you can do a high amount of damage. He hurts when he attacks that mark. So the bad thing is it can be random. But man, you spread that mark around and take advantage of it, you can take enemies down in a flurry. Leopold, my next tier S character, and that's because this champion he is a tank that can actually step in and take damage from other allies. So it's a 35% chance of taking the damage himself when an ally with high attack takes damage. So he can jump in and guard them. And that's just annoying because that is the target I want to go after first, that ally with high attack. So then I'm trying to attack it and he keeps jumping in every few attacks, taking that damage, takes reduced damage when he does that. He's a nice tank that can actually throw himself into the battle. Can inflict attack down, can taunt. So that taunt is not the taunt we think of in a lot of games. Taunt actually means they have to do an auto basic attack. And a lot of times it's not even the same, it's not even the right color. So that's an annoying ability. It's actually very, very useful. And then can gain some mana as well. So Justina, I have in the A, debated an S tier here. Because there's an ability that I really like. So passive is remove 1 debuff from the target, supported by Justina with 50% chance. What does supported mean? The level 2 ability here, Blessing of the Holy Spirit, grant assist to an ally. If the ally uses an active skill targeting an enemy, Justina will assist with a normal attack. Grants attack up to that target as well. And I really, really like that because let's look at this normal attack here. Deals 130% of attack of an ally with high attack. So it takes the attack from an ally with high attack. So this actually ends up being a high damage normal attack and gains mana on it. I like Justina quite a bit for that assisting. Not a huge fan of the level 3 because gains reflect damage, just kind of like the counter attack I mentioned. Reflect 50% of the damage to the attacker upon taking a hit. A lot of times it's hard to force them to attack that. Unless you have Garba. Garba is my final S tier character. I had 3 of them. Final S tier champion. He gains solid rock when the battle begins. That's going to reduce damage. But the big reason is this one right here. He grants attract to himself. That's what we normally think of as taunt. Forces enemies to attack Garba. And that is great when you can make them attack your tank. That's what a tank's supposed to do, right? The only one of these tanks that can actually reliably do it, force enemies to attack him, and that's why he's S tier. That's why he's an S tier tank. So can also remove a buff from target, and then just grant some mana, do some base damage. Boo! Boo the Bear has some DOT, some damage over time synergy. He gains 20% turn gauge when he attacks an enemy with damage over time. And we've seen 2 other characters that can inflict damage over time, so there's some nice synergy there. But actually, other than that, I don't really love Boo. Decent amount of attack there, can inflict the damage over time. But again, here I mentioned this earlier, grants attack up to himself, but he loses his turn. Yes, he gains turn gauge by increases turn gauge by 30%. If you were to attack an enemy with a damage over time, you'd get 20% though. A lot of times I just feel like it's not worth sacrificing a turn to give yourself 20% extra attack for 2 other turns. So I don't love that skill, but he can inflict damage over time on his normal attack. So I do like the damage over time synergy, just not a fan at all at that level 2 skill. So that's why I had him in B tier. Acorn, a rare, but I wasn't a huge fan. Had it in C tier, and it's the same argument. He's a tank, but he doesn't really punish you for ignoring him. So he does gain extra turn gauge when allies with recovery is attacked, and he can give all allies recovery. We can help heal them up, and then when they're being attacked, he will gain turn gauge. But I just don't feel like he does enough with his other turns. He does have a chance to inflict taunt, can deal some damage, not a ton, but can deal some damage. So I don't know. I feel like I'm worried I might be underrating him, but maybe I just have to change my playstyle. But I'm not a huge fan of these tanks that don't really punish you if you ignore them. Wallaroo is a community favorite that I don't like. I love the character itself, but I'm not a huge fan. So if an ally is at 30% chance or below, he has a increased chance of a platinum chest. What is that? This is kind of his main ability here. Treasure found, he can heal allies. If he gets a wooden chest, he heals a random ally. Healing a random ally, you could heal an ally that doesn't need it. I found that to be useless a lot of times. Heals the ally with the lowest HP. If you get a gold chest, that's decent, but it's still just not a huge heal. We think of what are all these damages they're doing. 70% of attack. Well, that doesn't even offset the amount that a normal attack will do. Now that's not 100% true because those attacks have to go through defense. But overall, the heals, it's just not a huge heal. You get a potential AOE. That's kind of a gold mine. If you get the AOE heal, it's still fairly low. I just didn't find the heals to be that worth it. His Boomerang Storm hits random enemies, equal to 180% of attack. That doesn't end up being very much, so it's just not a ton of damage. And then pretty standard normal attack. So I put Wallaroo in tier C. I'm sorry, Discord community. I know you guys love your Wallaroo. I didn't find him to be that great. So anyways, there we go. There is my tier list. Let's put it up here one more time. I will link it down below as well. This is sure. There is almost definitely going to be some champions that I put in some places that are going to look silly by the time we get through all this. Okay, and I'm only considering if you have commons through rares. Some of these might pair well with epics or legendaries, and we just don't have that synergy yet. So yeah, no doubt when we look back on this, it's probably gonna look a little stupid here in maybe just a few weeks. We'll see down the line, but like I said in the last video, I'm not an expert yet. I've only played the game a couple weeks on the test server, but that's a couple more weeks than most of you have played. So I've got a little more knowledge than most of the player base at this point. So if you're wanting my answer to the question, which characters should you go after? This is my initial guide to maybe at least start the discussion. So if you like this, make sure to hit that like button or retweet button, or whichever platform you are watching this video on. Sub to my channels. I'm going to be live streaming when the game comes out. We're going to have more tier lists. We've still got epic to go through. We've still got legendary to go through. There is going to be a lot more Champions Arena content coming. I hope you guys stick around for it. I hope you come join, play the game with me. This is going to be the #1 game utilizing NFTs. I'm a believer. I am a believer. I'll see you guys on the battlefield.